We made it again.
Hey, John. I don't think Brian knows he's muted.
Yeah.
Oh man, oh, that is so good. Hey, so actually that was just a live demonstration of how this live show is working, and also I'm getting texts in real time like, hey, you're on mute. So just to prove that you're on mute continues to be the most popular phrase from 2020, here we go. So welcome to Intersections Live. We are doing something new and fun today, which is streaming live, of course, on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. But we're also piping in to the amazing phenomenon that is Clubhouse. So if you are on Clubhouse and you're listening live, welcome. Please do share your questions for Brock and later Kara Goldin at briansolis.com. I'm monitoring here in real time, and we will get your questions on the air. Also, please do let us know where you're tuning in from. We want to hear where we're reaching in the world, and we also want to hear from you. So make sure to put your questions in the comments. This is a fantastic show today. I'm really stoked to have Brock Pierce here with us. But before we bring him up, let's officially welcome you. And also, I'd like to introduce my co-host, John. So every week, Intersections is this essentially conversational jam session. We dive deep into the intersections between technology, innovation, culture, and ideas. And we bring amazing, diverse personalities and worldviews together for the greater understanding and also greater unlearning that we all can greatly benefit from in these new years and these new times. So without further ado, I would love to introduce my co-host, John Kao, someone who I have grown increasingly fond of, both his personality and humanity, but also his brain. Very, very lucky to have him with us. The Economist has called him Mr. Creativity. He's also been called a serial innovator from The Economist. He's a thought leader, entrepreneur, advisor. He's been working in the fields of innovation and creativity for over 30 years. He's written a bestseller called Jamming, The Art and Discipline of Business Creativity. He's a Tony-nominated producer of film and stage, and the thing that I love about John is that he is an incredible jazz pianist. He's an incredible musician, but he also brings that improvisation, that complexity, and that genius into his thinking, but makes it approachable for all of us to enjoy. John, welcome to Intersections.
Hey, Brian. I feel like every time I hear that introduction, I'm hearing it from my missing twin, because the reason that we came together to do this show is because of this amazing complementarity and how we think about things, our life experience, and our network, our whole being in the world, so to speak. So Brian, my erstwhile partner here, he was digital before digital was cool. And he's explored digital in relation to marketing, in relation to commerce, and especially in relation to innovation, which is a leitmotif of this show. We share kind of this polymath publishing gene. He's done books, he's done podcasts, he's an in-demand spokesperson for the new economy, and he even has a day job, which is global evangelist for innovation for Salesforce. So, Brian, there you go.
Love it. Well, without holding anybody up, we've got a full room at Clubhouse, and it looks like we've got people tuning in from all over the world, across all of the networks. This is so exciting, everyone. Thank you. You make this show so electric, which is, I think, the magic of live. So let's bring up Brock Pierce. Brock, hey, welcome from Puerto Rico. I don't even know how to introduce you. I mean, you have done so many things in so many years, but I mean, most recently, you were a presidential candidate. You have become synonymous with cryptocurrency. Your work, of which I want to dive deep into in 2021, is really focused on transparency in all forms of finance, politics, business, and just the world itself. For those who don't know, he was also a child actor. He was famously in the Mighty Ducks Disney movie. But with that, Brock, I'm pretty sure we could use up the whole show just introducing you. Welcome. Oh, and you're pulling a Brian, Brock. You're on mute.
There we go. Well, yes, the censorship and muting and cancel culture, clearly it seems to be affecting us all. But thank you for having me. And also thank you for, I just followed a bunch of friends on Clubhouse. I've been so preoccupied that I have not been taking advantage of this new platform. And thank you for the reminder to be tuning in more often. So appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, it's our pleasure, and I think we could have a whole show on Clubhouse and its phenomenal rise so quickly. But let's just jump right in, Brock. So coming off of a presidential election or a campaign of which your platform was pretty powerful in trying to raise awareness of the need, not just for a third party, but for actually dare I say, humanity and transparency in our world. So how did you, I mean, gosh, you're so synonymous with cryptocurrency. What inspired you to make a run for presidency?
Well, so my life seems to be structured by decades. And so let's say from the ages of 10 to 20, my life was really about the media. From the ages of 20 to 30, it was about virtual worlds and virtual currency, basically leaving this reality. And my 30s was really about taking those concepts from the future and seeing if those things that worked in the virtual could be applied here in the analog. And I just turned 40 last November. I normally get a head start on the following decade, a few years ahead of time, basically getting basic training. And my 40s appears to be entirely devoted to public service, taking the concepts that we've been implementing, utilizing technology, and trying to integrate them into our, call it systems of governance, those things that govern over us. And so I'm trying to show up for the right reasons. I'm not seeking money. I'm not seeking power. I'm trying to bring important ideas and conversations to the forefront. Obviously, my running for president in this last election was not to win. Clearly, that was not going to happen. It was an exploratory mission to understand the mechanics of the system, to get the basic training, to bring some of those ideas forth, and to be preparing myself for future runs that might be viable. And just to clarify a couple of things. One is, I'm not sure we really need another third party per se. I think that we have a bunch of those. I think the problem is really it may be a problem more with parties themselves. George Washington was the only independent president we've ever had. And at his farewell address, and this was also echoed by a number of the founding fathers, there was a very real concern and a warning left for us about the risks of political parties, specifically if two parties were to ever become dominant, the challenges and the risks that would present. And so I think that as a people, what's really important is that we're voting for people, not parties, that we really start to lean in and kind of step away from the whole party infrastructure. And so from my perspective, I'm not trying to create a third party. I'm trying to create a third platform, something that really just enables the building of a government of, for, and by the people, something that brings us back to a path of unity. Right now, so many Americans are voting against things. They're not voting for things. And so I think it's really important that we step back and understand our mission here on Earth, which is we're here to act according to our conscience. We're here to do the things that we feel is right. And I think that matters most in the people that we vote for. And so I'll leave it at that, just to kind of summarize. My 40s is about public service. I'm here to step up and show up and serve in whatever capacity is called and where we can make an impact.
Wow. That well said, Brock. I actually really appreciate what you're doing, and I want to tie it into the greater good beyond politics. Because you've been so instrumental in the rise of cryptocurrency, You've been successful as a result of it as well. What parallels can you draw then from what this decade represents for you, and then the lessons that we're learning from blockchain, from crypto, and also, my goodness, kind of watching politics spill over into finance in the last few weeks, for example?
Yeah, so the philosophical drivers, behind cryptocurrency and sort of blockchain technology, what is it really all about? Because most people on the surface see Bitcoin, maybe digital gold, democratization, financial inclusion, and obviously an opportunity to make money. And obviously those are our core components, but at its core, it is really a system of consensus or governance, which is not something that you'll see on the surface. And so if you've worked in this space for a while, you really start digging deep into our systems of governance. You go back in time because you have to understand the past so as not to repeat the mistakes in the future. So you go back to the Magna Carta, you go back to the founding fathers, and you start asking yourself, how did we get here? Where are we going? And what kind of world would we like to live in the future? You also start to realize that it's about accountability. It's about transparency, at least in the areas that are necessary, while preserving liberty, which means that there are areas where privacy are necessary. And so I spent a decade basically asking myself a lot of these really important fundamental questions. And then you start looking at government, the role of government, and where it's going. I could make a compelling argument that governments are effectively going to be platforms in the future, and we're going to be building systems on top of it because the world is changing again as a result of technology. Technology has disrupted everything, and technology is going to start to disrupt government in ways where our elections, our democratic process, for example, technology can enhance these things. If we can bank from our phones, we should be able to vote from our phones. And if we can vote from our phones, it means that we can vote from anywhere in the country. And if we can do that, that should drive accessibility. Accessibility should drive engagement. Engagement should drive, hopefully, better, smarter decision-making by us, the people. And so there's a whole host of things that my work in cryptocurrency got me thinking, which is what led to this. And so about 3-4 years ago, I made a personal vow, a commitment to service for the rest of my life. And I realized I was going to need some training. And that's why I moved here to Puerto Rico. I had started the first crypto bank in the world down here in Puerto Rico in 2014 because I recognized a systemic risk to the industry. Back in 2013, if you were a cryptocurrency entrepreneur operating in the United States, banks wouldn't let you open up bank accounts unless you were called Zappo, Coinbase, or Circle. And they were lucky because they had sort of the Silicon Valley bigwigs behind them. And so Silicon Valley Bank permitted a few companies. But for everybody else, you couldn't open up an account. And out of naivety, most of these people were breaking federal law. If you open up a bank account and you don't fully disclose the nature of your business to the bank, it's technically against the law. These entrepreneurs didn't know that. They're just, entrepreneurs taking risks that they don't fully understand. They're like, oh, I'll open up an account in my personal name and process things. But as someone with a fair amount of experience, I'm like, wow, this is a systemic risk to our entire industry. You could basically round up 50 entrepreneurs and lock them all up. I'm like, wow, we're going to need a bank. And so I looked at buying state chartered banks, federally chartered banks. Eventually, I came to the realization it would cost a minimum of about $25 million and probably take me 2 to 3 years. And I'm like, there's got to be another way. What is the back door into the U.S. financial system? And then I'm like, wait, the United States has territories. What about Guam, Samoa, the U.S. Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico? And so I got a hold of someone and I'm like, can you buy a bank in Puerto Rico? Could I start a bank in Puerto Rico? And it turns out, as a matter of fact, there had just been legislation passed that made it fairly easy. And so I came down here to do that. And because of that, I was familiar. So fast forward to 2016, I make a vow of service. 2017 hits. I'm like, okay, Puerto Rico's the place. I'll go there sometime in the next few years. And then Hurricane Maria hit. And the hurricane obviously devastated the island. And I'm like, well, I already made the decision to go. This isn't a convenient time. And the longest power outage or blackout in American history is underway. I kind of do work that requires internet connections and electricity. But I'm like, I did make a commitment to help. I guess if not now, when? And I jumped on a plane and moved down here to Puerto Rico in the midst of that blackout to see how I could be of service. And I've been living here for a little over 3 years, seeing what I could do, trying to solve problems related to food security, renewable energy, innovation, philanthropy, biopharmaceutical job creation, eco villages, all sorts of stuff. But I live in a number of places here in Puerto Rico. I'm talking to you from Dorado Beach right now. I keep a place, I see some questions in the chat. I keep a clubhouse, an ancient monastery in Viejo San Juan. I'm in Condado. I'm in Carolina. I'm out in Ceiba, Vieques. I'm all over the island.
Wow. What a calling and what a gift to not just Puerto Rico, but to everyone following your work. This is an incredible story. And I mean, John, I don't want to, I could actually just keep going. So I feel like I better bring you in and make sure that we balance this conversation.
Well, let's start with a little thought experiment. Let's say you had an hour with President Biden, and he was open-minded about what you were talking about in terms of the whole kind of authentication of information, blockchain, credentialing, authentication of information, et cetera, and that you had this America 2.0 vision. What are the 2 or 3 things that you would most like people who are, that have their hands on the steering wheel to think about? Because, I think everybody can understand what it would be like if you had digital citizenship and, you could vote from anywhere and it was safe and secure and authenticatable. But making that transformation is no minor task. I mean, that there are so many entrenched interests. There's so many legacy systems. It's disruptive innovation for sure. And there's so many people who would, be the friction in the system. So, what would you say? What are the couple of glorious vistas that you would paint as the picture? But even more importantly, how would you get somebody in that kind of a position to think about the transformation roadmap?
Yeah, so I think we covered, call it authentication as it relates to voting and identity and things of that nature. So I'll take us down a different rabbit hole. One of the other things that I co-founded was a company called Tether, where we created the first stable coin. We created the digital US dollar. That system today is doing over $100 billion a day, call it $40 trillion a year right now. And governments around the world have now recognized that technology can be used to enhance their currencies. China in particular has created the Chinese digital yuan to be able to export their currency to places like Africa, Southeast Asia, Latin America, places where they always want to get their hands on US dollars. And so the work happening there, potentially could challenge the US dollar's reserve status in the world. And so if I had an hour with the president right now, I would probably be focused on that issue first and foremost. And this is odd coming from someone with such a background in cryptocurrency, but I'm someone that has done pretty deep work into understanding these issues, because a lot of people in crypto are like, I don't like the dollar, governments are overprinting. And the answer is, yes, that's true. But as an American, the US dollar is the foundation of our nation's economy. The US dollar's reserve status is what provides us a lot of our quality of life. If something were to happen to the dollar or its reserve status, it would have a very material negative impact on all of our lives and all of our institutions. And this is an area where the US has been the capital of innovation historically. We're living through the fourth industrial revolution, and there are things that we can do to make sure that we fare well as this continues to unfold. Right now, government tends to be more like a hammer and everything looks like a nail. Regulators are more about restricting innovation than fostering or enabling it. And I think that we have to continue to invite the best and the brightest. We need to create the sandboxes that are allowing that development. I mean, this is certainly one of the most important areas of innovation in the world. We could argue the most, but let's just say one of. And it's imperative that a lot of that development and a lot of the best and brightest are doing it from here. I think the future of our country depends on it to a fairly large extent.
Well, where are the sandboxes today? I mean, are we talking about Silicon Valley and South of Market Street District in San Francisco? Are there sandboxes in the public sector? Is China good at sandboxes in the areas of your interest? I mean, what's going on?
I'd say that we have a lack of sandboxes. I think that the regulatory sort of response from, call it the federal government and the state governments, in the case of California and New York in particular, has been the opposite of what it needs to be. It's so filled with regulatory uncertainty that a lot of our best and brightest entrepreneurs have been leaving the country and moving to Europe, moving to Asia. It's having the opposite effect of, I think, what we need, which is to be, keeping our best entrepreneurs that are building in this area, building here, and attracting others. And again, it's regulatory uncertainty. Investors that are often financing these businesses or entrepreneurs that are taking not just financial risks, but potential risks of their liberty. When you're on the front line of innovation and disrupting systems like financial services, let's just say the risks are real. You can find yourself in jail, even though you don't know you did anything wrong. It's a high stakes game. And if you make a misstep, you may pay for it. And we're seeing that with things like Robinhood, which we can get into after this. But I think it's really important that we create these sandboxes. Where we are seeing it, though, is in the state of Wyoming. And so Wyoming is becoming the capital of innovation around blockchain and financial services, kind of the last place that you would expect. But that's because the state legislators have passed 19 laws basically saying we welcome innovation here, recognizing that their primary industry of coal and natural gas is in decline and that they're going to need new sources of industry. And they're like, hey, we'll pass some legislation. What do we got to do? And so a group of us have been advising the state legislators. They've been making moves, and the results are incredibly compelling. Thousands upon thousands of new companies with blockchain or something like that in their names have been incorporated in Wyoming just last year. Two of the fastest growing financial services unicorn decacorns have moved in part and possibly in total there, Kraken being one, Cardano being another, and you're seeing more and more of them. And you would not think that Wyoming is the place that entrepreneurs would be flocking to in droves, but we are seeing that. And that is because we are so desperate as an industry for basically government that is willing to engage with us. And the vast majority of us are good people that want to see a better, brighter future for all of us. And a few bad actors should not be the reasons why we slow down innovation. But we're seeing it in Wyoming. I've spent time with state legislators in Utah, Idaho, Alaska, Colorado. And when I explain what's happening in Wyoming, they're like, how do we get in on that? What laws do we need to pass? And so a lot of us spent time with the federal government in the Capitol. And we've made very, very little headway on that front. Where we're starting to see real headway is at the state legislative level. And I think it's pretty clear which way this is going to go. States are going to be competing for business, competing for our residency. We're seeing a bit of what I'd call the great exodus right now out of places like California, out of places like New York. People are moving to Texas, Florida, Puerto Rico, but we're also seeing that to places like Wyoming. And so the states seem to be like, oh, I get that. And once you show them evidence of the size and scale of the businesses that are willing to migrate to their states, they're like, okay, we're in. This is not like theoretical. You have evidence of this working.
Well, and that partnership, that new kind of ecosystem that you're describing is necessary because government controls vast pools of data. It owns the problems that, in a sense, the kind of ecosystem of free thinking entrepreneurs are trying to innovate around. And, these are two cultures that can't just be looking at each other across a big cyclone fence. I mean, there has to be a new model of collaboration for sure, and a new model of financing. And, and then, sandbox is an interesting term, isn't it? Because you were talking about a new kind of infrastructure for doing experimentation, prototyping, that I would imagine almost from the get-go assumes a certain level of scale that is very hard to reach if you're simply a venture finance company or if you're some lonely bureaucrat in an office in state government somewhere, but where by these, crossing the beam, so to speak, you might get something that would actually support the scale of innovation that you're talking about, which is really interesting.
Yeah, like for example, it's worth double clicking. One of the things that Wyoming did is they created the speedy banking license. Basically, normally to get a license to create, anything that would be in the category of what we'd call banking, has an extraordinarily high regulatory bar. It requires massive capitalization. I mean, it's not an area that is really welcoming of innovation or startups. And so one of the things we could do is say, well, we can have different tiers of banking licenses. We can basically have a startup banking license, which gives you a 2-year grace period where you have a basic filing. And as long as there's certain risks that are not met, we're permitting innovation to exist, and where you can kind of work your way up to call it a higher degree of regulatory oversight. But how do we foster innovation? And we have a lot of really high bars that exist that have effectively protected some incumbent industries. And then because those industries become so incumbent and so powerful, there's basically giant walls that protect them, but it's ultimately not serving us as the people. The only constant in the universe is change, and we need to continue to adapt and evolve as a society, as industries. And if you're not evolving, you're dying, and we're falling behind on so many fronts.
Hey, John, can I just ask a real quick question on that? Because there are two constants: change and people who don't want it. And the thing that I'm seeing is that there's certainly no shortage of people looking to jump on the innovation bandwagon on the tail end of it. I would like to propose that an area of need is folks like you on the front end of it, changing policies, working with regulators, inspiring investors to think about different aspects of engagement with entrepreneurs who want to be involved in paving the way for their own potential. What are some of the things that people need to hear that they're not hearing to be more involved in this part of the process?
Well, I think part of it is just realize that we're all in this together. We're ultimately, again, all in this together. And there's a lot of this mentality of it's us against them. And we're seeing that, this country is divided. We're seeing that politically. We're seeing it economically. We're seeing it, racially. We're seeing it between the public and private sectors. And we have to basically make the effort to build a bridge, to re-engage people in conversation that we may disagree with, because we have different backgrounds and different perspectives. But the conversations have to continue. And one of my biggest concerns right now is that we're not even, we ridicule people for engaging in conversations with groups that may not be of their own. And that eventually leads to very, very bad outcomes. And I would encourage all of us to engage with people that are not part of whatever our, call it, however we identify ourselves. We need to step outside of our comfort zones to continually engage with others so that they can understand our perspective, so they can understand where we're coming from. And through that understanding, we can find the necessary compromises, which will, provide us with a collective path forward. And we see this on so many levels. And, this is an area where obviously I've committed myself as of late. On the phone with an important member of Congress today. I have these sort of conversations on a constant basis. I mean, today was an interesting one because it was really about the things that we just discussed, but also everything that's going on with GameStop, what's going on with this sort of Reddit rebellion, this movement of retail investors. Is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? What should we be doing? And the reality is, most of our elected officials are actually good people with good intentions. They just need to be informed. And when people don't have the right information, how can you expect them to make the right decisions? And a lot of times people in positions of authority are getting all of their information from one place, often the incumbent that you mentioned. And that's why it's important for us, those of us that come from an area of innovation, to put forth the time and the effort to make sure that our perspective is being heard, that our voices are being heard, because our voices matter, our perspective matters. And until all of the voices are heard, we're never going to find that balanced sort of world that, I dream of living in one day.
Yes, John, back to you. Thank you for allowing me to cut in.
So, given the very diverse portfolio of activities that you're involved in these days, Brock, how do people kind of tap into what you're working on? I mean, is there a central clearinghouse of information? Are you publishing? Are there organizations that you're involved with that people should be aware of? If you're trying to move the rock up the hill in terms of establishing these sandboxes, how do people become more familiar with the work so they can pitch in or provide their own point of view on things? What's the Brock Pierce user interface? I guess I'm asking.
It needs to be improved, like all things, work in progress. And so at least I've kind of defined my life, and I view it as a number of pillars. So I have my personal life, my family, things of that nature. I've got my business life and the things that I do for work, which is, for me, not about making money. I don't measure my success in life by what I have, but by what I give. And my work is really just an opportunity to continue to refine myself, to continue to develop the tools in my toolkit so that I can do whatever it is that I might end up doing in the future. But I have my philanthropic life and making sure that I devote time to that. Now I've got my public life, call it public service. And then the work that we're doing here, which is another area that needs to be refined. I'm calling this, call it my pillar of influence. How do I create that reach to be able to connect with as many of you as possible so that I can learn from you and hear from you the things that matter so that I can at least do my best to represent some of those things in the other conversations that I'm having. Right now, you can follow me on most forms of social media. I'm in the Clubhouse room right now. On Twitter, it's at Brock Pierce, Instagram at Brock J. Pierce, Facebook, and on my website, you can go to brockpierce.com. That's getting an overhaul right now. My lack of a better word, my family office is Percival. .vc, and that's like the Knight of the Round Table. Sir Percival, PERCIVAL Victor Charlie. Percival is the one that discovers the Holy Grail, in that story, the Arthurian legend to restore the light to the world. And then my main foundation, I've got a couple of them, but the main work that I use there is Integro, integro.org. And Integro is a Spanish word with two meanings depending upon the inflection. It means integration and integrity. The idea, as someone that is not from Puerto Rico or of Puerto Rico that moved here, the idea is to integrate with integrity. Integrity is an important word for me. So it's not well organized. Everything should be cross-linking so that if you're interested in philanthropic work, you can meet me on that stage, right? If you're interested in, sort of what I'm doing politically, you can go to, by the way, brock.vote. That was, you'll see a lot of my presidential sort of policies there. And that's where most of my public service and political opinions will be shared. As you stated in the beginning, it's complex. I'm having a hard time organizing my own life and organizing it in a way that I can understand it, which means I'm sure it's very difficult for everyone else.
Well, anytime I've gotten to know an entrepreneur with diverse interests, it's clear that they're on a journey of self-development and self-discovery, and that the work is really a manifestation of a constant becoming. It's a destination that you never arrive at. So it's not surprising to me that you're in this kind of creative ferment, because that's the essence, I think, of a lot of what great entrepreneurs are all about. So, Brian, I think we're probably at an inflection point here, as we might call it, or a pivot point. Brock, it's been great talking with you, and good luck with all of your great work.
Yeah, Brock, thank you so much. I'm going to follow up behind the scenes with you on some ideas on things that we might be able to do together to advance some of these conversations and to involve more people on the front end of change. So thank you for joining us from Puerto Rico. Thank you for all you're doing, and I will talk to you soon.
Thank you so much for having me.
Man, I got to take a breath. Woo.
Take a shower.
Wow, I have a page of notes of things that I wanted to get to. So we'll.
Yeah, we didn't even get to the GameStop Reddit stuff. Let alone the future of cryptocurrency. I mean, this is a guy that would have amazingly relevant opinions about so many things that we didn't touch. Well, we'll just have to see if he'll come back.
Yes, in fact, John, do say a few words in general. I'm going to talk to the Clubhouse room, and then we'll bring on Kara.
I'm going to vamp now about our general philosophical point of view. Brian and I have been talking a lot about amplifying the formats that we're using here. So you may have noticed that we're trending in the direction of 2 speakers as opposed to 3, because really, giving somebody 17 minutes is not enough to encapsulate the key points of a lifetime of work. And I also think that we're going to be focusing on specific topics and then pulling in guests around those topics, perhaps even to the point of panel discussion. So we're very open to your ideas about subject matter, because we're in the lab right now, kind of cooking some stuff up.
or we're in the rehearsal room jamming.
Right.
To continue the metaphor. Well, on that note, so welcome everyone if you're tuning in from wherever you are, LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, or those folks on Clubhouse engaging in our experiment to see if we can bring in the network into the fold. Welcome. We want to hear where you're tuning in from. We want to hear your questions and your comments and thoughts. And with that, I want to introduce Kara Goldin. She is the founder and CEO of Hint. She's also, whether she knows it or not, a mentor. I am constantly inspired not only by her accomplishments, but by all of the things, as Brock had said, all of in the ways that she gives back. If you follow her on any of her networks, or you follow her speeches or presentations or engagements or her work in general, she's constantly inspiring and motivating people. Almost, Kara, as if you've known what it's like to start a business from scratch and grow it over the years. Welcome to Intersections, Kara.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. With that, I guess maybe you could spend a minute just sharing with us the road to Hint. I love the story going back all those years as to why, but it's a story I think that is super relevant still today. And then we'll jump into Q&A.
Yeah, so I didn't have experience in the beverage industry. I was a tech executive at a company called America Online. I actually started my career in journalism. So I guess I've been in multiple industries before finding my true purpose. And when I decided to start Hint, it was really out of my own recognition that I had an issue with diet soda. I was a Diet Coke addict and was not living as healthy of a life as I wanted to. I had gained a bunch of weight. I had developed terrible adult acne, and my energy levels were low. And it wasn't until I started reading labels did I figure out that I was, really doing a lot of harm to my health. And I switched about 16 years ago now to drinking plain water. And I found that water was really kind of boring. And so I started putting fruit in the water to get myself to drink more water. And that's when the idea for Hint came about.
Wow. Well, not that this is a commercial or anything.
There you go. Right there on Clubhouse. It's showing the hint right there. So if you could see it on Clubhouse, but
I for those on Clubhouse, I'm showing that we're in solidarity here, and not just a big fan of her work, but also a big fan of the products, and also all of the things that you stand for in those products. So, Kara, I'm just going to ask a quick question, John. Let's mix things up. I'll throw it to you after this question, and then we can just throw it back, keep it more dynamic. Kara, one of the things that I admire about the move to Hint, and there's so many things to talk about, but I want to just focus here because of the times that we're in. You were a successful tech exec. For those that don't know, you were leading a leader in part of something that Steve Jobs helped create a while back, and to make a move to a product in an industry of which you didn't necessarily have the experience, but you had the passion and you had the vision. Where I'm going with this is that we're in 2021. We have incredible change happening in the United States, but all around the world. There's chaos, there's turmoil, there's uncertainty. You took a big leap of faith. What about that experience would you translate to these times to help people chase that passion, to chase that idea?
Yeah, so there's a few things that come to mind. I mean, first of all, I wouldn't have been able to articulate it when I was leaving my role at America Online. I'd been there for 7 years and had uh, led the building of e-commerce and shopping partnerships, we called it, back in through the 90s, and it was $1 billion in revenue to AOL when I decided to leave. And I think that the hardest thing was when you've been through, I think most of you will recognize the term hockey stick, whether you've been through one or not. But when you've been through a hockey stick, what happens is things naturally start to level off. Thankfully, in our case, they weren't tanking either. They were sort of leveling off. But I found myself kind of bored and not really learning. And I was growing a team of about 200 people and mentoring and teaching and managing, but not really learning myself. And so when I left, I was in the stage of trying to figure out, do I join boards? What do I do? And it's such an interesting thing that I didn't even understand until much later. But when I saw this problem in front of me around my own health and something that I was truly passionate about, that's when I had an idea for a solution to solve this. And I thought, okay, I'm going to go and try, and I'm going to try and get it on the shelf at Whole Foods. Part of the interest that I had was just learning this whole new industry, because again, I had sort of, put that on hold so that I could grow in an organization and become the youngest vice president at AOL and one of the few female executives at that level. But after a while, title, money, all of these things start to not really feel that important. But, you can't really talk about that, right? It's something that you sort of feel, inside, that you feel almost embarrassed about it. And maybe you leave and, you try and figure out what you're going to do next. But you just don't really know. So that's where my head was. And I think a lot of what I really saw that was exciting, frankly, was this brand new industry that I knew nothing about, that I could go back down to the bottom and go and learn again.
Well, that's a question actually that I want to, or topic I want to build on, because I think this notion of not knowing is very intriguing. I had an opportunity to interview Sergio Zeman when he came back to Coca-Cola to run marketing there, and one thing he told me was that he was trying to fill out the marketing team's ranks, and the only criterion was that they not have any experience in the beverage industry, which kind of tracks with your experience. So two things. One is I'm curious to know how that kind of beginner's mind, as Zen Buddhists would call it, played to your advantage in terms of launching Hint. And then related to that is, where is that beginner's mind taking you in terms of where the brand is going to go? Because obviously it would seem that well-being and high functioning and so on is the leitmotif. So you've got one product line, but there are obviously a lot of other things you could be doing and are probably doing.
And actually, we have a few other categories that we've launched, and we launched sunscreen and deodorant over the last few years, and hand sanitizers during the pandemic. So we've launched into categories that we really believe are not getting it right in health. And I think it just goes back to servicing our customer and trying to help our customer get healthier. The one sort of silver lining that I talk about from the pandemic is, I think so many customers today, or consumers, I should say, worldwide, are sitting there focusing on how do they get healthy and how do they stay healthy. Health has become such an important thing for every single person. And I think that that's where Hint really falls into, front and center with that. But just being curious, I think that that's the beauty of walking into an industry that you don't know anything about. If you're smart and you're curious, and you're willing to work and figure stuff out and not be afraid to ask questions and network along the way and think, I think that those are things that no matter what industry you're in, are really the most important things to really figure it out. And keeping focused on, obviously having a great product and how do you get to market, but also focus on the customer all the time and figuring out, like, how do I solve these problems? Somebody asked me the other day, what keeps you up at night? And I mean, it's easy, the customer. I think about the customer all the time and how they're thinking about things. How are they managing the pandemic? Do they want to go back into stores? Do they not want to go back into stores? Do they think about the cardboard boxes that are around, so many direct to consumer items? And, how can we try and eliminate some of that cardboard as we grow our direct to consumer business is over 50% of our business now. So things like that, I think, are just really important and make me, think that somebody who doesn't have the experience is really the one to sort of be able to handle a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, because it seems that your products have a lot of how can I put it, sort of behavioral implications. Like so it's great that you can get a better liquid product that isn't filled with chemicals and that has a great and pleasing aura about it. But the question is really hydration. Most people don't drink enough fluids during the day. And if you want to lose weight, if you want to maintain a healthy internal pH and metabolism and so forth and so on, you have to drink whatever, 6 to 10 8-ounce glasses of water or enhanced water a day. So there's a behavioral problem set that the product is meant to address. But then the question becomes, how do you actually change the behavior, which is a whole different level of customer intimacy and translating that into the marketing and the value proposition, I would think.
Yeah, and I mean, there's so many points to this. I think, people asked me early on, how did you get the word out about the product? Because we were not only creating a new company, but also creating a new category. So for those of you who haven't thought about that, when you have a product that nobody has, like an unsweetened flavored water, and we were launching a company is like it's like climbing a mountain, but launching a new category is like climbing Everest, right? You've got to get the consumer to be educated and want it and really know why they need it. And so that was our situation. And so we started doing events kind of by accident. People would call us and say, hey, we drink Hint all the time. We work at Google. I have this, event at my school or this fun run, and I need 50 bottles. And what we found was that when people would show up at these events, then they would write to us and thank us for supporting an event that they cared enough about to attend. And so they would find the stickiness between us and our brand and what they enjoyed too. And there's a love and appeal when somebody, wants to be in the same community as you. And that's what we found. Of course, you have to have a great tasting product and, one that hydrates and all that. But I think that's really how we grew the brand. And we continue to grow the brand just by helping people, really just getting to understand that customer more.
And having a kind of it sounds like a kind of a local awareness. I mean, bringing the product down to the grassroots in a sense and solving everyday common grassroots kind of dilemmas around whether it be their events or their personal wellness and how hydration fits into that or whatever. Interesting. Yeah, got it. So Brian, back to you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think we have time for maybe one more question. Kara, so I want to build on a couple of things, and then also I just wanted to send you some praise for that book cover. As it was on screen, it reminded me of a movie poster, Kara Goldin, starring in Undaunted. It was
so funny. Well, it is me, but it's the photographer is. I got to know him actually through advertisement that I was a part of years ago. And it's a photographer that some of you may know as Pictures Platon. And the guy's a genius on a lot of levels. And so you've seen many of his posters, and it many of his pictures. And it's funny, when I went and asked him, I kept comparing photographers to him. And then I reached out to him. Look, you never do it until you never get until you try. And his response to me is, I've never done a book cover before. And this is really interesting that you're asking me. He's photographed every president, every sports athlete, every celebrity that you can name, and he had never done a book cover. And so I said, I would love to, can I do it? And he said, I would be honored to do it. And so again, you never get until you ask. So he did an amazing job.
He did. I love it. I love it. All right. So this question, as the final question, is going to have a bit of a buildup. So work with me here. I've been doing a lot of research specifically on how the consumer has evolved as a result of the pandemic. Part of it builds on the research that I did with LifeScale that showed how digital itself changes us. And then how, when we all had to become digital first with shutdowns, lockdowns, fear, et cetera, how we started to change at speed and scale, but then also the somatic marker that is the pandemic and the emotional impact and psychological impact on us as consumers. So a lot of things are changing. Our values are changing. Our aspirations are changing. The importance of wellness, which is good news for you, is changing. But also how people make decisions is changing. And couple interesting stats. Ipsos said that 61% of consumers say that they're probably going to stick with the digital first shopping behavior after the pandemic is over. And another one was that during the pandemic, from McKinsey, that 75% of US consumers have already experimented with a new brand. And 60% of those are going to stick with that new brand. So the question that I have for you is, what advice, what are you thinking about, and what advice do you have to share for how businesses should think about retail versus direct-to-consumer relationships as the consumer evolved this year or this past year, and as they continue to evolve?
So I think for any business, having multiple choices, right? In any cases, whether it's a way to go to market, or whether being it direct to consumer or retail, or when in our case, when offices all shut down, that was like 15% of our overall business, not 40, but it was 15. It was a big deal. And we had these other revenue streams and these other ways to actually sell through. And so it didn't tank us, right? I think that's the thing that I think about all the time is look at your business and figure out, how do you have multiple revenue streams? I actually think that while the consumer may say that they're not going to be shopping anytime soon, I do believe that there are certain stores, Costco, Target, Whole Foods, that are still doing okay, right? And they're also, people might not be shopping in the traditional way of going there, but they're going through companies like Instacart and some others that are, really being that in between and go between the customer and the store. So I think that while it is changing, I don't think things are going away. But I do think that digital is just, for us, it's always been about a relationship with the consumer. It's been about really continuing to look at the consumer, think about how they're going to shop and do things, but also just offering maybe a closer relationship. And you do that. I had a longer conversation with another group this morning about this, that you can actually find Hint on Amazon and Target and in Costco and lots of places, and on drinkhint.com. We won't always be the cheapest play for consumers, but we offer everything that we do on our site. And so that's the thing. If you're worried about, Amazon's going to undercut my price, and so I shouldn't even start, right? That's the wrong attitude. Like, if you worry about price all day long on your product, that's the road to nowhere. It really is. It should be about choice for the consumer.
Amen. Well, speaking about the road to somewhere, I'll leave you with a quick minute to share with us a bit about the Undaunted story. and
Yeah.
and how that continues the journey for you and us post-show here.
So I call myself an accidental entrepreneur, but I also call myself an accidental author because I never thought I'd write a book. I was a journalism major, but this was actually my journal. 4 years of being on the road, way too much, and just writing out my stories, and based on questions that people would have for me when I was out public speaking, and then finally I just decided, after hearing from so many people about stuff that I said, they said, wow, they'd write to me on social and send me an email and they'd say, you really helped me to think through an issue, most of the time not even in the same industry that I'm in, but on something totally unrelated. And so I thought, if I could bind these notes together, and a friend who's an author said, you mean a book? And I said, I guess, I don't know. How do I do that? And so I guess my curiosity to actually figure out, all of a sudden I got intrigued, and I said, okay, well, how do I do this? And I've also now written a book during a pandemic and launched a book that is now a bestseller, and didn't know what I was doing. Right. So it can be done, but you have to live undaunted, and you have to be willing to try and know that it might not work out. And but when it does, it feels pretty good.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. Karen, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I'm going to give you some applause on Clubhouse, which is basically going on and off mute.
I love it.
Thank you so much. And we'll reach out soon.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Wow, John, another action-packed episode. Time for me to drink my hint. I really do enjoy our opportunities to meet so many incredible people and to share their stories. For everybody that's in the Clubhouse room, thank you so much for being part of our experiment. We'll probably do this more often. If you have any feedback or ideas, please share them at brian@briansolis.com. We'll be doing this more often. And also for those on Clubhouse, thank you. Thank you for your attention today. This is a real special platform, and I think you'll all agree that's why we're spending so much time on it. John, on that note, always a pleasure to be with you.
Indeed. Well, we get to do it again next week.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And I'm also looking at maybe introducing another Tuesday episode. And we and for everybody following along, please take a look at intersectionslive.com. Also, please subscribe to our newsletter, of which maybe, Gregarious, you could share that link, but it's also at intersectionslive.com. It's our little Substack experiment that we'll be launching here soon. We've got a lot of the content ready to go. Again, thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next week. Thank you, John.
Hey, thank you. See you.